News18 exclusive news break. What we're bringing you next is details around the US President Donald Trump eyeing Afghanistan, in particular looking at Afghanistan's Bagram air base. We're just going to bring you a little bit more context, but essentially reports indicating that his administration has been quietly pushing national security officials to find a way to get Bagram air base in Afghanistan back from the Taliban. We'll just wait for reporters to join us to bring us more details. This is an air base that lies an hour north of Kabul. The Taliban took it over following the collapse of the Afghan government and US military withdrawal that took place, you'll remember, back in 2021. Now, for Trump and for his administration, essentially, officials believe this base is important for multiple reasons. And we'll bring you more details around what those reasons are, but they include reasons pertinent to both Afghanistan and China. Let's go over to our colleague, Siddhant, who joins us right now to bring us more details. Siddhant, Trump himself had struck a deal with the Taliban back in 2020 during his first term, which had mandated a full withdrawal of US troops from the country. What would this potentially mean? Trying to get this base back, what would it potentially mean for the US? How heavily would they need to be present? Would it mean troops on the ground? Bring us more details.
Well, Bagram Air Base has always been very close to USS's interest in the region. And in fact, now United States wants Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base back. President Trump said yesterday that can't abandon important base to Taliban or any other power. So basically, they are fearing China. So US seeking control of Bagram Air Base, given up in Afghanistan withdrawal. The fear is of China. That pushes Trump to get Bagram Air Base. In fact, top sources are telling to Manoj Gupta that US can't leave open ground to China. US policymaker wants to come back in the Afghanistan. President Trump said that we are trying to get it. One of the reasons we want the base, as you know, it's an hour away from where China makes its a nuclear weapon. So as I said, that this base is very strategically located. It is the largest air base in Afghanistan, perhaps has been used by the US forces for decades. And after the withdrawal of the US forces, the Taliban took over this base, and now the Chinese have shown interest in occupying this base, perhaps developing it and using it. Now, Trump has to say that China could make it a nuclear base, and perhaps that's the reason that he wants the base back. Now, Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base served as a linchpin for the United States operation in the rugged country where the long war against the Taliban and their Al-Qaeda allies was fought with airstrikes. In July 2021, all US and NATO troops left Afghanistan's biggest Bagram Air Base. In fact, top intel sources are telling this to Manoj Gupta, that US comeback in Bagram will undermine Pakistan's leverage over the Taliban regime. Islamabad had celebrated the American withdrawal as a strategic victory. This renewed US military presence would dilute ISI's monopoly over Taliban. Taliban will be under stress of relationship balancing between Chinese, Pakistan, Russian, and Iranian. This creates a space for rival factions, ISIS-K. If the US gets Bagram, it directly threatens China's Belt and Road projects and nuclear facilities. Pakistan heavily dependent on Beijing and will be caught in a crossfire between supporting China's strategic depth. Pakistan will be afraid and will be avoiding being seen as obstructing US re-entry. Now, Pakistan doesn't want US to re-enter Afghanistan. That is for sure, because Pakistan knows that if America directly enters Afghanistan and starts speaking to Taliban, perhaps their role will be minimized. And perhaps that is something which Pakistanis don't want. They always want US to rely on Pakistan for whatever they need in Afghanistan. So that is also one angle to it. But right now, we should look at it as a direct rivalry between and a competition between the United States and China, that who gets hold over the Bagram Air Base, because it is strategically located and perhaps it's very, very important for both countries. And with this statement, President Trump has once again made America's intention very clear, that America indeed wants to re-enter Afghanistan. They don't want to abandon Afghanistan.
Okay, Siddhant, can you just lay out for our audience, though, what would the US's strategic plan be here? Would the plan be that they would ask the Taliban and the Taliban may actually make space and give this base back to them? Because the US president has been immensely critical of the manner in which in 2021, the US actually left that base. That base is on the China border with Afghanistan. It was very critical, as you've pointed out. And he's been very critical of the Biden administration about the manner in which they handed it over. What is the plan? Do we have any indication of how the US hopes to reclaim the space?
Afghanistan perhaps was to contain Soviet powers in the region. But since the withdrawal of the Soviet power, there was a war in Afghanistan. The manhunt to catch up Osama bin Laden. Now USS's interest in the region, perhaps if they want Bagram back, then is only to contain China. And that is something which everybody understands. And it was Donald Trump, under whose first tenure United States and Taliban met in Doha, perhaps which laid the foundation for the withdrawal of US troops in 2021. So President Trump may criticize the withdrawal of the troops, but the fact is that it all started when he was the president of the United States. The talks with Taliban started in Doha when he was the president. So U.S. interest has always been there, and 2 decades back it was to contain Soviet powers. Now it is to contain China.
Okay, if you could just stay with us. Major General A.K. Sivach joins us right now on the phone lines. Sir, thank you for joining us here on the show. Sir, if we could just come over to you to understand a little bit more about how you see this playing out. Question one, and perhaps the question on top of everyone's minds, do you see U.S. troops re-entering Afghanistan?
I think the point is, as far as Bagram airfield is concerned, it is very important for America. There are 4 reasons. One is, no doubt, it can keep a surveillance on Chinese. It can also indirectly keep a surveillance on the central state where the influence of Chinese is increasing. It also able to keep a track on Iran, because in case if US has to use force against Iran again, they need bases both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So Bagram becomes very important also to ensure that Russia, they can keep the surveillance there. Remember, the Chinese are now to increase China-Pakistan economic corridor in Afghanistan. So Chinese influence in Afghanistan is increasing rapidly. To counter that, they airbase. So one can say strategically this airbase is very, very important. And the way Pakistan economically needs money from IMF, World Bank, they have been fully isolated. There are a number of, so they need America. I think they will establish a compromise, and it looks like that it can come. Possibly US will manage to convince Taliban government to hand over back airfield, which is strategically very important for US, and they will like to have this basis in this region, because as today, after they have left, the bases which are left is only in Pakistan.
Okay. General, thank you for joining us here on the show.